My daughter-in-law blocked me, but didn't know I was paying for their dream apartment. That sentence still makes my stomach churn every time I think about it. Not because I care about being blocked. I'm too old to let a phone screen dictate my worth, but because of what it represents: rejection, ingratitude, the quiet, calculated exclusion of someone who once bent over backwards to make sure her family didn't fall apart. When they first came to me, Michael, my son, and Ava, his wife, they were nearly in tears. I remember it vividly. Michael wouldn't even look me in the eye. He kept rubbing his neck like a nervous schoolboy, and Ava had that sickly sweet tone in her voice that she always uses when she's about to ask for something. Hold on a moment before we move forward. Let us know where in the world you're watching from. And if you're loving these stories, don't forget to hit subscribe. Tomorrow's episode is going to be absolutely mind-blowing. They told me they'd found the perfect apartment. Not just any place, a dream apartment, in Ava's words. Hardwood floors, exposed brick, floor-to-ceiling windows, even a tiny terrace with just enough space for a breakfast table. It was expensive, of course. Everything is these days. But Ava spoke like her life depended on securing that lease. We just need a little help, just for the first year, she said. After that, Michael's promotion kicks in and we'll be completely self-sufficient. I should have hesitated. I should have asked for details, conditions, something in writing. But all I saw was my son looking defeated and Ava pretending to hold him together. I didn't want them to feel like failures, so I said yes. I offered to pay the full rent for 12 months, quietly. I didn't want to shame them or make them feel beholden. I said I would handle it anonymously through a management account I already had with the leasing office. And just like that, their dream came true. In the beginning, things were fine. They'd invite me over once a month. Always rushed visits. Ava watching the clock, Michael checking his phone. But I made peace with that. I was never the kind of mother-in-law who pushed herself into their lives. I respected boundaries. I didn't hover. I just wanted to see my son happy. But slowly things changed. Text messages stopped being returned. My calls went to voicemail. Birthdays became quiet affairs, with only a "sorry we couldn't make it this time" message sent hours after the day had passed. Then came the photo. It was posted by Ava's cousin on Facebook, publicly, as if I didn't exist. A dinner party in their apartment. 15 people, balloons, cake, matching wine glasses. It was Michael's birthday. I hadn't even been invited. I stared at that picture longer than I should have, trying to understand what I had done. Was I too involved? Not involved enough? Had I said something wrong at some point? Was I just inconvenient? At first, I thought maybe it was just a misunderstanding, that they were overwhelmed, busy, that social media didn't mean anything. But I wasn't born yesterday. I may not be tech-savvy, but I know a deliberate omission when I see one. So I called Michael. It rang twice and then went straight to voicemail. I left a message, calm and composed, just asking how he was doing. No accusations, no drama. He never called back. I waited a few days. Then I tried texting Ava. That's when I noticed. Blocked, just like that. No warning, no explanation. I tried sending a message, and the little circle never turned blue. I checked her profile, and it was gone. She had erased me. It wasn't just digital. It was personal. I sat on the edge of my bed that night, staring at the ceiling in silence. I couldn't remember the last time I felt that kind of emptiness, and I've buried a husband, lost siblings, and survived breast cancer. But this was a different kind of grief, the kind that comes when you realize your place in someone's life was only temporary, conditional. I didn't sleep much, but the next morning, I made coffee, pulled out my old notebook, and started going through my finances. That's when I remembered something. I was still paying for that apartment. Every month, like clockwork, the rent was drafted from my account. I had never once missed a payment. They had never once offered to take it over. In fact, now that I thought about it, they never even brought it up again. Not a single thank you after that first month. They acted like it was theirs, like they earned it, like I was just an invisible ATM that spit out rent money with no strings attached. That realization hit me hard. I wasn't just excluded. I was financing my own erasure. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood in my kitchen and stared out the window for a long time. The tree in the backyard had started blooming again, pink blossoms spreading quietly, unbothered by the people who walked past without noticing. I picked up the phone. Not to call them. I called the leasing office. A woman named Claire answered. She recognized my name immediately. "Oh, hi, Ms. Whitmore. Everything okay with the account?" I smiled politely. "Yes. I just wanted to confirm the lease details for Unit 4C. Is it still active?" "Oh yes, they renewed for another year just a few weeks ago. Same payment method, all set through your ACH." "I see. Did they mention anything about taking over payments themselves?" There was a pause. "No. They said everything was being handled by the same party as before. We assumed you were aware." "I wasn't," I said. "But thank you, Claire. That's all I needed." I hung up. They renewed the lease. Without asking me. Without even telling me. That was the moment the grief began to shift. It was no longer sadness. It was insult. They didn't just block me. They erased me while continuing to use me. And they had no idea that everything they had could vanish with a single phone call. I didn't make any decisions right away. After speaking with the leasing office and confirming that Ava and Michael had renewed the lease without telling me, I needed time to cool down. I was angry, but I didn't want to do something impulsive. I've learned the hard way that silence, when used properly, can be more powerful than any loud confrontation. But I also knew one thing for certain. They had no idea I knew, and that gave me time. The days that followed were awkward. I'd bump into neighbors asking about Michael or Ava, not realizing we hadn't spoken in weeks. They'd say things like, "I saw your son and his wife at that new brunch spot. They looked so happy." Or, "I bet you're so proud of them for doing so well on their own." I'd nod politely, bite my tongue, and smile. What else was I supposed to do? Correct them in the middle of a grocery store aisle? The truth is, I was proud at one point. I had supported Michael through school, helped him with his first car, and even covered part of his wedding when Ava insisted on a venue with character. None of it was ever repaid. But I didn't do it for repayment. I did it because I believed that's what mothers do. And now, here I was, blocked by my daughter-in-law and ghosted by my only child, all while still covering their biggest expense. Started thinking about the last few conversations I'd had with Ava. How she always redirected things. How she started using phrases like boundaries and emotional space when I'd ask if I could stop by. How Michael had slowly stopped calling. How even his happy birthday mom last year was just a 5-word text with no call, no visit. Maybe I should have seen it coming. But hindsight doesn't help when you're sitting alone at your kitchen table, realizing you paid for a dinner party you weren't invited to. I kept all this to myself. Not because I was ashamed, though maybe a small part of me was, but because I wasn't ready to answer the questions that would come if I told friends or family. Questions like, why didn't you stop paying sooner? Why didn't you make them sign a formal agreement? Why didn't you say anything? Because I trusted them. That's why. One morning, about a week after my call with the leasing office, I received an email from the building's automated system. It was a routine notice. Maintenance will be entering Unit 4C on Thursday for fire alarm inspections. Tenants should ensure pets are secured and valuables stored. I stared at it for a while. That apartment was technically mine. Legally, the lease was in my name, and I was still listed as the primary payer. Ava and Michael were occupants, but not signers. I had every right to visit, or even enter. I didn't go, of course, but I thought about it. Not to make a scene, but just to see. To walk through the front door and remind myself that I was not some outsider in the life I helped build. Instead, I called my lawyer. Sandra has been my attorney for years. She helped with my will, my estate planning, and all the paperwork after my husband passed away. I didn't tell her everything right away. I just said I had some questions about lease rights and tenant protections, hypothetically. After I explained the situation, she didn't say much at first. Then she asked, Why haven't you canceled the payments? I laughed because I wanted to believe they'd come around. I didn't want to look like the one who ruined everything. Sandra sighed. You've already done more than anyone should. If you want out, you can. You're under no legal obligation to keep paying for two adults who've effectively cut you off. Even if it's mid-lease? I asked. Even then, she confirmed. If they renewed without your consent, and if the contract states that they're not signers, they have no authority to make financial decisions on your behalf. I thanked her and hung up. The next day, I logged into my bank account and canceled the automatic rent transfer. It felt strange, like flipping a switch that had been stuck for too long. I half expected the computer to ask, "Are you sure?" But it didn't. It just said, "Recurring payment canceled." That was it. I didn't tell anyone. I just waited. I figured I had about 2 to 3 weeks before the building's office realized the rent hadn't been paid. I knew Claire would call or email. I also knew Ava and Michael wouldn't notice right away. They never did. They just assumed the money would always be there. It was a Thursday afternoon when the first sign of trouble came. I was sitting on the couch watching an old game show when the phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. 2 minutes later, a second call, then a text. Michael. Mom, can you call me ASAP? It's urgent. I stared at the screen. My first thought wasn't anger. It was disbelief. After all this time, after being ignored, blocked, and forgotten, now he needed to talk. I called him back. He answered on the first ring. Hi, Mom. Listen, something's wrong with the rent. The building called Ava and said the account bounced or something. I told them there must be a mistake, but they're saying it was canceled. Did something happen? With your bank? I stayed quiet for a moment before answering. No, nothing happened with my bank. He paused. So, you canceled it? Yes. Another pause. Why? You tell me. Silence on the other end. Michael, you and Ava cut me out of your lives. You blocked me. You stopped calling. You threw a birthday dinner and didn't even invite me. But you still expected me to pay your rent every month? He tried to interrupt, but I kept going. I didn't cancel it out of spite. I canceled it because it was clear I wasn't welcome in your life unless I was providing something. There was a long, heavy silence. Then he said, Ava didn't mean to block you. It was a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? I repeated. She was trying to clean up her social media and I just happened to be swept out with the trash? He didn't respond. I exhaled slowly. Michael, I gave you 2 a year. Then I gave you more. I didn't ask for anything in return. But I won't fund my own exclusion anymore. It ends here. But we just renewed the lease, he said, now sounding more desperate than defensive. We don't have that kind of money right now. Ava's between jobs, and I stopped him. That's not my responsibility anymore. You're really going to let us get evicted? You made your decisions, I said firmly. Now it's time to live with them. He didn't yell. He didn't beg. He just hung up. That was the last I heard from him that week. But I had a feeling it wouldn't be the last time he called. After that phone call, I waited. I thought maybe it would take a day or two, maybe even a week. But eventually Ava would reach out. She never did. What I didn't expect was what came instead. A text message from an unknown number at 7:14 in the morning. 2 days later, unknown. You seriously left us like this? Michael said you just stopped paying. No warning? I didn't need to guess who it was. Ava had finally decided I existed again. I didn't respond. 10 minutes later, another message came. Unknown. You've put us in a horrible position. Rent is overdue, and now the office says there will be a late fee. We're 2 days late, and they've already started the penalty process. I stared at the screen. Thinking about the months, years, I'd gone above and beyond for the two of them, not just financially, but emotionally. I remembered the day Ava called crying because she and Michael were fighting over money, and she needed someone to talk to. I had sat with her on the phone for over an hour, just listening. I remembered sending groceries to their apartment during the pandemic. I remembered baking Ava's favorite lemon bars and dropping them off outside their door when she got laid. Off. Now she was texting me like I was a stranger who had scammed her. Still, I didn't answer. By the third message, the tone changed. Unknown. Honestly, this is just petty. You're putting your own son at risk just to prove a point. That's when I finally responded. Me. No, I stopped letting people walk all over me without consequences. That's not petty. That's self-respect. She didn't text again that day, but Michael did. This time, he didn't ask. He tried to manipulate. Michael, I just want you to think about how this looks, Mom, to other people. Ah, there it was. How it looks. Not how it feels. Not what it means, but how it appears. The old Marshall family tactic. Control the narrative. At all costs. Me. You're worried about appearances now? You weren't worried when you ignored my calls for months? You weren't worried when Ava blocked me? He read it. Didn't respond. That silence was more honest than anything he could have typed. By the end of that week, the building's leasing office left a voicemail. Claire, the same friendly voice from before, sounded different this time. More formal. Hi. Ms. Whitmore. Just a quick update. As of today, Unit 4C's payment is officially 10 days late. Late fees are accumulating, and we haven't been able to reach the primary occupant. Since the lease is still under your name, we legally need to notify you before pursuing any further actions. That was the moment I knew I had to take a step further. I called Sandra, my lawyer. I need to transfer the lease fully to them, or cancel it altogether, I said. But I don't want any more ties to that apartment. Sandra walked me through the options. Legally, since I was the sole leaseholder, I had every right to either transfer or terminate. If they refused to take responsibility, the building could issue a 30-day notice of termination, and the unit would revert back to management. I felt a pit in my stomach. Not guilt, not exactly. It was disappointment, because at that point, I still wanted to believe Michael would step up, but he didn't. Instead, Ava sent me a message 2 days later that made my blood boil. We talked to the office. They said we'd need you to sign off to keep the lease. Since you're refusing to help us, we'll have to move out. I hope you're happy. No apology, no responsibility, just blame. I stared at her message and thought about all the stories I'd heard from other women my age, mothers who were abandoned emotionally the minute they stopped being useful, women whose children forgot them, whose kindness was taken for granted until it ran out. I never thought I'd be one of them, and yet here I was. I waited exactly 3 hours before replying. I didn't want to answer out of emotion. Me, you, were never supposed to renew that lease behind my back. You made financial commitments in my name without asking. That's not just inconsiderate, it's dishonest. You're lucky I'm not taking this to court. She read the message and never replied. A few days later, I received an envelope in the mail. It was from the building's management. Inside was a final notice of non-payment for Unit 4C and a formal document stating that unless payment was made in full within 5 days, the lease would be canceled and the apartment reclaimed by the property. Didn't pay. I let it happen. The morning the apartment was officially vacated, Claire called me one last time. They left in a hurry, she said. Didn't leave a forwarding address. Of course they didn't. They didn't even bother to call and say goodbye. I went by the building that afternoon. Not because I needed closure, but because I wanted to see it for myself. The apartment door was open when I arrived. A maintenance worker was sweeping the floor. The place looked smaller than I remembered. Quieter. A few things had been left behind. A chipped coffee mug, an empty picture frame, a broken lamp. Things they probably didn't think were worth taking. That apartment had once been a dream for them. Something they cried for. Something I gave them without hesitation. Now it was just another empty unit. I stood there for a few minutes, then turned around and left. That was the last time I ever stepped foot inside Unit 4C. The fallout came fast and loud. Michael's number lit up my phone 4 times over the next 2 days. I didn't pick up. He left 2 voicemails. The first one was calm. The second wasn't. You didn't have to go that far. Mom, you could have just talked to us. Ava's been really upset. We're staying with her sister now, and it's been humiliating. We just needed a little more time. But you made it personal. He still didn't get it. He thought this was about time, about money. It was never about either. It was about respect. It was about the quiet, cruel way they pushed me out while continuing to benefit from me. And now that the benefit was gone, they wanted to talk. To explain. To apologize, maybe. But only because they were cornered. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. For the first time in a long time, my bank account didn't have that $2,100 withdrawal. The one I used to ignore because it felt like the right thing to do. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I owed anyone anything. They had chosen to walk away from me when I was still giving. Now that I'd stopped, they were just facing the reality they built for themselves. No more explanations. No more help. They weren't children, and I wasn't a doormat. After they vacated the apartment, I expected things to calm down. They didn't. In fact, it got worse. 2 days after the eviction was finalized, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. Later, I listened. Hi, this is Karen, Ava's sister. I don't know what happened between you and them, but it's caused a lot of stress. They're staying here now, and honestly, it's been hard. Ava's crying all the time, and Michael hasn't been himself. I think this whole situation could have been handled better. Maybe you should consider sitting down and talking things through. I deleted the message without replying. I didn't know Karen. I had met her twice. Once at the wedding, and once at a holiday dinner years ago where she complained for 2 hours about her own mother. She wasn't part of my life. She didn't know the full story. Yet somehow, she had decided I was the one who needed to handle things better. That was only the beginning. Over the next few days, messages started coming in from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Distant relatives, old family friends. One even came from a former coworker of mine who apparently still kept in touch with Ava on social media. All of them had something in common: concern. Not for me, for them. I heard Michael and Ava had to leave their place. I hope everything's okay. I'm not taking sides, but maybe you and your son just need some space to heal. Family fights happen. Don't let this be permanent. I was stunned. Ava had been busy. She didn't contact me directly, but she had clearly made sure her version of the story was spreading fast. And in that version, I wasn't the mother who gave without asking. I was the bitter old woman who left her son and daughter-in-law homeless. Because of a misunderstanding, there was no mention of the blocked calls, no mention of the lease renewal behind my back, no mention of how I was used financially for nearly 2 years while being emotionally shut out, just vague talk about hurt feelings and miscommunication. It was insulting, but not surprising. I didn't respond to any of the messages. Not out of weakness, but because I wasn't going to argue my value with people who only knew one side of the story. Still, the silence made me restless. I started waking up early again, even without an alarm. I wasn't sad. I wasn't even angry anymore. I was exhausted. Exhausted by the way I was constantly expected to carry emotional responsibility for everyone around me. Then came the guilt text. It arrived one afternoon from Michael. Michael, I just wanted to say we're sorry. Things got out of hand. Ava's been having a hard time, and I know we haven't handled everything perfectly. We're trying to stay with Karen until we figure something out. I miss you. I hope you're doing okay. I read it 4 times. On the surface, it looked like a peace offering. But reading between the lines, it was what I expected. Selective accountability. No mention of how I was treated. No apology for the lease. No acknowledgement of the months of exclusion. Just a message aimed at triggering my guilt. I didn't reply. A day later, he tried again. Michael, I know we've made mistakes, but family should be able to come back from that, right? You've always believed in giving people second chances. That was true. I had believed in second chances, in third and fourth ones too. But that belief had been burned out of me by the people who used it against me. That night, my phone rang. It was Michael, I answered. "Hi, Mom." His voice was softer than usual. Measured. "Hi, Michael." There was a pause. Then, "I know this has been a mess. I don't want to fight anymore." "I'm not fighting," I said. He trailed off. "I guess I didn't realize how serious you were about walking away." I stayed quiet. "I mean," he continued, "you really just let it all fall apart. You didn't even try to fix it." That was the sentence that broke what little patience I had left. I kept my voice steady. "Michael, I paid for your rent. For almost 2 years. I was left out of your life, ignored, blocked, and disrespected. I gave you everything I could. You took it. And when I stopped giving, you turned me into the villain. I didn't let anything fall apart. I stopped pretending. It wasn't already broken." He didn't know what to say. I could hear him breathing on the line. Slow, shallow. Finally, he said, "So that's it?" "That's it," I answered. "I thought you'd always be there," he said, sounding almost like a child. "I was, until I wasn't wanted anymore," he sighed. "Ava's not handling this well. That's not my responsibility. I just thought you'd at least be willing to talk things through." "We are talking," I interrupted. "But you're not hearing anything. You just want things to go back to the way they were without facing what you did." He went quiet. Again. Then, without warning, he said, "You're making this permanent, aren't you?" I paused. "Yes." And then I hung up. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't emotional. It was final. I turned my phone off and went to bed early that night. The next morning there were no calls, no texts, nothing. The quiet was strange, but it was also peaceful. For the first time, I didn't wake up feeling like I owed someone an explanation. I made coffee, read a book, and spent the day running errands without carrying the weight of someone else's disappointment on my back. That weekend, I got a call from the leasing office again. Claire just wanted to confirm the account. Was closed and no balance remained. It wasn't. There was still a late fee on the unit Ava and Michael had occupied. She asked if I wanted to clear it, since the contract had ended under my name. I asked how much. $275, she said. I thought about it for a moment. Then I said, "No, send the bill to the last occupants. They'll need to learn that actions come with costs." Claire didn't argue. She just thanked me and ended the call. A few hours later, another text came through from Michael. "Michael, they're saying we owe $275 in late fees. I know that's not a lot for you. Can you please just cover it so we don't get a mark on our rental history?" I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I typed one word, "Me." "No." He didn't reply. He didn't have to. He understood. I was done cleaning up their messes. They had erased me, excluded me, disrespected me. Now they were discovering what life looked like without my help, and it was only just beginning. 2 weeks passed without a word. After I refused to cover the $275 late fee, I didn't expect to hear from Michael or Ava again. I assumed they'd finally understood that I wasn't going to play the same role anymore, that I wasn't going to step in every time something got uncomfortable. But I gave them too much credit. One afternoon, I was pulling into the driveway after a grocery run when I saw him. Michael, sitting on the steps of my porch, hunched forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped together like he was preparing to say something serious. I sat in the car for a moment, just staring at him through the windshield. He looked smaller somehow. Not physically, but emotionally. Deflated. I took a deep breath and got out. He stood up as I approached, but didn't say anything right away. I walked up the porch stairs, grocery bag still in hand, and unlocked the door. "Are you coming in to talk?" I asked without looking at him. "Or just here to sit and mope on the porch?" He followed me inside. I placed the bags on the kitchen counter. Michael stood in the entryway like a guest who wasn't sure if he was invited. I didn't offer coffee. I didn't ask if he was hungry. I waited. Finally, he spoke. "Mom, I need to talk." Then talk, I said. He looked around the house like it felt unfamiliar, like he hadn't grown up here, like he hadn't lived in that back bedroom for 20 years. I've been thinking a lot, he started. About everything. I crossed my arms. He continued. I know things went too far. I know Ava and I messed up. I didn't say anything. I wasn't trying to hurt you. Neither was she. We thought we had everything under control. We didn't think it would get this far. That's the problem, I said. You didn't think at all. He nodded. I know. There was a long pause before he added, Ava's not doing well. This whole thing hit her hard. That phrase again. Ava's not doing well. Ava's not the one who was blocked. Ava's not the one who was excluded and erased while still footing the bill for everything, I said. And if she's not doing well, that's between her and her conscience. He shifted uncomfortably. She wants to fix things too. She just doesn't know how. I shook my head. No, Michael. She doesn't want to fix anything. She wants things back to how they were, when I paid silently and never complained. That's not the same thing as taking responsibility. He sighed, rubbing his face with both hands. I just thought if I came in person, maybe we could reset everything. There's no reset button for disrespect. He looked like he was trying to swallow a bitter pill. I walked over to the fridge and started putting groceries away. I didn't stop to soften my words. I wasn't angry anymore, but I also wasn't interested in coddling him. When did I stop being your mother and start being your safety net? I asked. At what point did you decide that my role in your life was only to pay bills you didn't want to deal with? I didn't see it that way, he said quickly. Of course not, I said, because it was convenient not to. He was quiet again. Then carefully he asked, Is there any way forward from this? I stopped unloading for a moment and turned to face him. That depends on what forward looks like to you, I replied. If it means me going back to paying your way, no. If it means pretending none of this happened, no. But if it means you learning what real accountability looks like, then maybe. He swallowed hard. I'm trying, he said quietly. I took a second job last week. Nights. It's not much, but it's something. I nodded slowly. That was the first real piece of honesty he'd offered since all this began. Good, I said. He hesitated, then added, Ava's looking for work too. We're thinking about moving in with her aunt for a while, just until we're stable. Do what? You need to do, I said plainly. He looked at me like he was expecting more. A hug, maybe. An emotional moment. But I wasn't going to reward bare minimum behavior. He finally said, I miss how things used to be. I looked him in the eye. Then maybe next time, don't destroy what you miss. His shoulders sagged. I walked past him toward the hallway, signaling the conversation was over. As I reached the corner, I turned back. If you really want a future with me in it, I said, start by being someone who treats people with respect when they're not handing you something. He didn't reply, just gave a slight nod and let himself out. I stood there in the hallway for a moment, listening to the sound of the door closing, not slamming, just closing, soft but final. The next few days were quiet again, but different. This time, the silence wasn't full of dread. It was stable, like something had settled. I didn't hear from Michael. Not immediately, but I also didn't receive any guilt messages, no vague complaints, no accusations, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was in a tug of war for emotional control. A week later, I received a letter in the mail, handwritten, no return address, but the handwriting was Michael's. Mom, I don't know how to start this. I guess I just want to say I'm sorry, not just for the apartment or the money, but for how I let Ava treat you, and how I stood by and didn't stop it. I got so used to you helping that I stopped seeing it as help. I just expected it, and that's on me. I know I let you down. I don't expect forgiveness, but I do want to earn back your trust, even if it takes a long time. I'm not asking for anything. Just thanks for everything you gave us, even if we didn't deserve it. Michael, I read it twice. Then I folded it up and placed it in the drawer next to my bed. It didn't fix everything. It didn't erase the hurt, but it was a start. For the first time, he wasn't trying to rewrite history. He was facing it. That night, I made myself a proper dinner, sat at the table, lit a candle even. I didn't feel broken. I didn't feel responsible for anyone's disaster. I felt steady, and that was enough for now. About 3 weeks passed since I received Michael's letter. I didn't write back. Not because I didn't appreciate it, but because I didn't feel the need to. He had said what needed to be said, and for once, he wasn't asking for anything in return. That was new. The days went on. I started taking walks again, rejoining my old Tuesday coffee group at the church, cleaning corners of the house I'd neglected for too long. There was no dramatic shift, just small, quiet routines I reclaimed after years of living in the shadow of someone else's needs. Then, one afternoon, I got a call from someone I hadn't heard from in years. Denise, my cousin on my father's side. She had seen something on Ava's Facebook. She posted a story about losing everything because of bitterness. Didn't name names, but it was obvious who she meant. I sighed. I'm not surprised. Denise laughed, in that dry way. Only older women laugh when they've seen too much life. Let her bark, she said. Some people only know how to play the victim. It's the only way they feel important. That call stuck with me, not because of Ava's behavior, which, at this point, was predictable, but because of how Denise said it with zero emotion. She wasn't shocked. She wasn't even angry. Just unaffected. That's what I wanted to be. Unaffected. I realized that I had spent so long managing everyone else's emotions, especially Michael's, that I had forgotten what it was like to just exist without being on alert. A few days later, I was organizing some old papers when I came across the original lease documents for the apartment. All of it was still in my name. I thought about shredding it, but I didn't. Instead, I sat down at my kitchen table, pulled out a clean envelope, and wrote a short letter. To Michael and Ava, I've closed everything tied to the apartment. The lease is terminated. All final payments and documents have been processed. I no longer hold any financial responsibility for you, and I no longer allow myself to carry the emotional responsibility either. You both chose a path that excluded me while continuing to rely on me. That was your decision. This is mine. Do not contact me for money again. If you want a relationship moving forward, it must be based on respect, not expectation. That is the only condition. Mom, I didn't email it. I mailed it, physically, stamped, and sent. Let them feel the weight of paper for once, instead of hiding behind the comfort of digital excuses. About a week later, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Michael standing there. Alone. No Ava. He looked tired. Not in a theatrical way, not like he was trying to make me feel sorry for him, but genuinely worn down. He held the letter in his hand. I got your note, he said. I figured you did. He stood there for a moment, then asked, Can I come in? I nodded. We sat down in the kitchen. He didn't beat around the bush. I moved out. That caught me off guard. He continued. Ava and I were arguing nonstop. She didn't want to let this go. She said you ruined everything and that you'd turned on us. I told her she was the one who turned her back first. I didn't say anything, he went on. I told her I couldn't live like that anymore. Constant blame, no responsibility. She told me if I reached out to you again, I could pack my bags. So I did. I studied his face. He meant it. I'm staying with a friend from work right now, just until I can afford something on my own. But I'm figuring it out. That's what adults do, I said. He nodded. I don't want money. I don't want anything. I just wanted you to know I see it now. All of it. What I let happen, how I let her speak to you, how I disappeared the moment you stopped giving. I didn't interrupt. I let him speak. I don't expect everything to go back to how it was. Honestly, I don't think it should. But I hope someday we can build something better. I looked at him for a long moment. Then I said, "That depends on what you're willing to build, and how much work you're really willing to do." "I know," he said, "and I will." We didn't hug. There were no tears. Just an understanding. He left shortly after. As I watched him walk back to his car, I realized something. I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I didn't feel like the broken mother anymore. I felt clear. That night, I pulled out a notepad and began writing a list of things I wanted to do. Not for Michael, not for Ava, but for me. Take that art class at the senior center. Visit my cousin Denise in North Carolina. Clean out the guest room and make it into a hobby space. Travel to San Diego next spring. Learn how to use that new smartphone my niece gave me. They weren't dramatic goals. They were mine. Simple, quiet, free. The kind of life I used to put off because someone else always needed something. The apartment was gone. The bills were closed. And for the first time in a long time, so was that chapter of my life. Michael would have to rebuild on his own. And if he really meant what he said, maybe someday we'd meet again on equal ground. But if not, I'd still be okay, because I wasn't erased. I wasn't bitter. I was free.